looks like we're doing a live in my car anyway. I don't even know if I remember to name this live. Hello. Okay. I forgot what I read. Oh yeah, they were talking about the guards of Nyktos and getting them on our side. What are they called? Drakens? Draken. Okay, chapter 39. The following morning, I stood in the foyer of the Temple of Nyktos beside Castile, fiddling with the chest strap I'd found among Castile's weapons. I'd also helped myself to the iron dagger I'd found in the depths of the chest, and it was now secured to my harness. The bloodstone dagger was strapped to my thigh. Neither of us wore the crowns, having left them in the bedchamber. We stood with Kieran and his sister, Emil and Delano. Niall was sitting this one out, opting to spend time with his father. As I watched Delano adjust the strap holding his swords to his sides, I hoped he'd found time to let Perry know that he had returned to the capital. Kieran and I are pretty confident that the tunnel that leads to the mountains is the one underneath, Castile said. It's a narrow one with nothing really exciting. By really exciting, I assumed he meant the lilac-filled cavern. You guys did really weird things as kids. Vinetta stood between her brother and Emil, her arms crossed. I almost said two short kings. Two short swords were secured at her hips. She'd swept her long braids back from her face, and they hung down her back. I just thought I'd share that. I grinned. I didn't even know there were tunnels. Emil glanced at the jet black floors. There are. Hisa strode forward, two guards flanking her. They're accessed by the crypts. The crypts. I shuddered. Sorry. Castile gently squeezed the back of my neck. The good news is that it's nothing like the one you were kept in. It's okay, I told him. And it would be. It wasn't like we'd be spending any amount of time in them. Carrying a heavy ring of keys, Hisa continued toward a narrow door. Turning the key as she twisted the handle, the door creaked open. Faint light lit our way down a staircase that made awful sounds under our weight. The temperature dropped at least 5 degrees with each step, and the familiar musky scent turned my stomach. Hisa proceeded forward, passing several stone tombs. Castile stuck close to me, his hand slipping to my shoulder. He was right. The crypt was clean and well kept, flower garlands piled on the lids of the tombs. Are you sure about this? Hisa had stopped in front of another door as she thumbed through the keys. We are, I answered. She nodded and then proceeded to unlock the second door. These tunnels were once used to move goods from different areas of the city, and then they were solely used to transport the dead, she told us, and Emil's lip curled. But they haven't been accessed in several decades. I have no idea what kind of shape they're in. It's unlikely that there has been any type of collapse, she continued, but hopefully the route you seek is still open. From what I remember, it's a pretty straight path with only a few turns. Castile picked up a torch. Delano stepped forward, striking flint against the top. Sparks gave way to fire. He handed the torch to Kieran. It should only take an hour to reach the mountains. And then? I asked as he picked up another torch. Flames flared to life. That, I don't know. Castile looked at Kieran. We never went farther than the mountains. The mountains are tall, but not particularly wide through this area, Hisa said, frowning. We're at the foothills here, so I imagine it would be a half-day's journey. Farther north or south, it would probably take several days. How far have you traveled into the mountains? Vinetta asked, and I thought it was probably a good idea that we'd stuff the bag strapped to Emil's back with as much food as possible. Each of us carried our own canteens. It wasn't a lot of water, but we would have to make it last. To where the mist mingles with the clouds in scouting missions. I know we reach the mist faster here than in other areas, she answered. She glanced at the door. If I had any idea what waited in that mist. She trailed off with a shake of her head. Please be safe, all of you. To Castile and me, she added. The people want to know their queen and the people want to get to know their queen and become reacquainted with their king. And they will, Castile promised. Hisa blew out a deep breath as she opened the door, and a void of darkness beckoned. We will wait for your return. I watched the commander join the guards toward the entrance of the crypts. Thank you all for doing this with us. Vanetta grinned. It's not like any of us would turn down an offer to see Elysium. Why do I have a feeling that people are going to die on this trip? Are people going to die on this trip? Only because none of us have any common sense, Emil said. That too, Delano grinned. I, for one, am glad that I'm surrounded by those who have more loyalty and thirst for adventure than common sense, Castile remarked. And now for the rules. Yawn, Vanetta tossed out. I laughed. Well, these rules will hopefully keep everyone alive. Castile and I talked some things over this morning. Is that what you two were doing? Kieran asked. Yes, I snapped, cheeks flushing because that wasn't all we'd been doing. Anyway, if anyone sees a hint of mist, back away and let me go first. I didn't exactly agree to this, Castile muttered. Yes, you did. The mist cleared for me in the Skotos Mountains. I would think it would do the same thing here, I said. That way, none of you will walk into it and suffocate to death. Yeah, I want to avoid that, Emil said. And if we encounter anything, I should probably hold off on using the ether, I said, remembering what Kieran had said about the gods being able to sense when an ether was used. I don't know what it will do in Elysium, if it'll be any different or if the gods can sense it. I'm not sure that's how we want to wake Nyktos. How are we going to wake him? Delano asked. Well, I glanced at Castile. I thought we'd cross that bridge when we came to it. Vanetta lifted her brows. A moment passed. That sounds like a wonderfully detailed plan. Castile smirked. Aren't you glad you signed up? Totally, Vanetta replied, sounding so much like her brother. Ready? Castile asked, his eyes meeting mine. I wasn't exactly sure, but there was no point in delaying this, so I nodded, and we followed Castile into the nothingness. Time was a strange thing in the tunnels. With no light but that of the torches, we only knew hours had passed when hunger stirred. We stopped only to meet that need and handle personal ones in earthen rooms I convinced myself weren't full of six-legged insects. We could have been in the twisting, cramped tunnels for hours or longer, and I didn't think we'd know. Careful, Castile warned at some point in the never-ending tunnel, holding the torch ahead of him. The floor feels weak through this section. Stay close to the wall. I wasn't sure how he could tell that, but I did as he requested, pressing my body against the cool stone. The canteen dug into my back as I crept along, Kieran close behind me. My chest tightened as I realized that the tunnel had narrowed once more. I'd never had a problem with enclosed spaces, but I had a feeling I would now. Ooh, I do. Oh, I reached out, gripping the back of Castile's shirt without really thinking about it. I'd gotten into the habit of doing so whenever the walls or ceiling pressed in. Poppy, Castile whispered. What? I focused on the reddish glow beyond him. You know what I should have brought with us? He asked. More food, maybe a little pouch of cheese. I was hungry again. No, I answered. Miss Willa's journal. I stopped momentarily, and Kieran bumped into me. Thank the gods he'd given the torch to Delano, or my hair would currently be on fire. Really? Yeah, Castile continued forward. We could have passed the time taking turns reading from your favorite chapters. Are you talking about the same Willa? Vanetta asked from somewhere behind me. Yes. You see, there's this extremely popular book back in Solace. It's actually Poppy's favorite. It's not my favorite, you jerk, I snapped. Please don't stab him in this tunnel, Delano called out. My eyes rolled. I cannot promise that. Castile chuckled. What's in this book? I have a feeling I'd be interested in it, Vanetta said, and I heard Kieran groan. What is... A loud crack cut off her word. No! And then the entire floor of the cavern seemed to rumble beneath us. I spun around just in time to see Vanetta step to the other side of the wall and then disappear in a plume of dust. Horror seized me. Netta, Kieran shouted, his fear sticky against my skin as it mixed with mine. I got her, Emil yelled back. Sort of. Whatever relief I felt from his words was short-lived. Delano moved forward, holding out the torch. No, the orange glow cast light over the partial collapse and the floor around it. Emil was on his stomach, one arm stretched into the opening. How the Atlantean had been able to move so fast that he'd caught Vanetta was beyond me. I'm still here, Vanetta called out as her brother scrambled to the other side. I think. Castile caught the back of my shirt as I stared toward them. Too much weight on that section, he cautioned as Delano scanned the floor. The woven stepped to the side that remained intact. He was right, and I hated it because all I could do was stand and watch as Kieran reached inside. Give me your hand. Or give me your other hand, Kieran ordered. We'll pull you out together. If either of you two drops me, Vanetta's voice trailed out of the darkness, I'm going to be so pissed. Netta, if we drop you, I'm going to throw myself in after you, Emil advised. And then we're both going to find out what's below these tunnels. We're both going to be dead then, Vanetta hissed. Semantics, Emil replied. I've got you. Let go of whatever the hell you're holding on to. I think it's a root. Thanks for sharing, Emil said. Let go of the root and reach for Kieran. There was a soft grunt, and then Kieran cursed. I can't reach him, she gasped out. Try again. Emil shifted as if he were trying to position himself to grab her one hand with both of his, which would enable him to pull her up on his own, but I could sense his fear and worry. My heart lurched. I could totally understand Vanetta's hesitation. I shifted restlessly, hands opening and closing at my sides. Castile folded an arm around from behind. He squeezed. She's going to be fine. I've got her. I nodded as I glanced to where Delano was looking at the floor once more. His concern tripled, and I had a feeling that section near him wouldn't remain much longer. Frustration rose within me. What good were my gifts right now? I could harness the ether to ease pain, to heal, and to harm. Why couldn't I use it now, when help was so desperately needed? Why couldn't I? Better yet, who said I couldn't? Another crack sent a jolt of fear through me as pieces of the tunnel under Emil began to break. Castile cursed. If the section went, not only would we lose them, we'd be unable to return. I had to do something. I had to try. Forcing myself to calm enough to focus on the image I was building in my mind, I closed my eyes, pouring all good thoughts into what I was creating. I didn't want the ether to harm. My chest hummed as I saw the webbing of shimmery light seeping over the floor. I pictured it slipping into the hole and surrounding Vanetta. I saw it lifting her. Vanetta gasped. My eyes flew open. A silvery glow crept along the walls of the cavern. Kieran pitched forward, reaching into the tear as strings of light lifted Vanetta. He grasped his sister's hand, pulling her up as I pulled the ether toward me. Emil let go, scuttling back on his belly as Kieran and Vanetta collapsed to the side. Letting out a ragged breath, I pulled the ether back toward me as I sank against Castile. The radiance retreated and then disappeared. Are you okay, Netta? Castile demanded. Peachy. Vanetta rolled onto her back, breathing heavily. She tilted her head back toward Castile and me. That felt weird. You could feel it? I asked. Yeah, it felt warm and tingly. She dragged her arm over her forehead. Thank you, all of you. How did you do that? Castile asked as Emil stood. I pictured it, like you said. My heart still hadn't slowed, and I just hoped it didn't, break her bones. Vanetta halted in the process of rising, her gaze finding mine in the dim firelight. You didn't know if it would do that? No, I admitted sheepishly. She put her hands on her hips. God, I think I need to lay down again. Chapter 40. So Poppy can essentially... Okay, what I'm picturing whenever she talks about her little her white spindly things, and this is... Okay, I picture and it's very specific. It's this very specific web. I picture the web that Peter Parker shoots out as he's trying to catch Gwen. Like, you know how it looks like almost like a hand, like it's like stretched out, and it's that scene where it's like a hand, and the one that connects with like her that's the specific web spindly thing that I picture whenever Poppy talks about her little things going out. Except Poppy can, actually make it work out for her. Peter could not. Chapter 40. We traveled on, wary of the stability of the tunnel. Again, it felt as if we continued on for a small eternity, but the sudden and familiar scent of lilac sent a bolt of hope through me. Pressing through the narrow turn, a pinprick of light appeared in the darkness. We had reached the end of the tunnel and Elysium. Mist, Castile announced. I can see it coming through the opening. I tapped his shoulder when he didn't move. Cass. He growled low in his throat, but flattened himself against the wall, holding the torch high. As I passed him, I pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. That doesn't help, he grumbled. I would have smiled, but I saw it. Tendrils of thick mist seeping into the opening in the tunnel, drifting toward us. I moved forward, setting up a prayer that Jasper had been right about my ability to pass through the mist, and that my suspicion that it would not only allow me to do so, but also scatter, making it safe for the others, was true. The primal magic rose from the floor of the cavern, forming wispy fingers as it stretched out toward me. I lifted my hand. I don't like this, Castile muttered from behind me. It shouldn't hurt her, Kieran reminded him, but concern bled into his words. The mist brushed against my skin, the feel of it cool and damp and alive. The ether retracted, lowering to the ground and then disappearing. I exhaled roughly, looking over my shoulder. It's okay. Castile nodded, and I moved ahead. The opening wasn't all that large, only about 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. You'll have to crawl through. Just go slowly, Castile advised. We have no idea what is on the other end. Hopefully not a dragon looking to serve up some flame-broiled red meat, Emil muttered from somewhere in the darkness. Well, that put a pleasant image in my mind, Delano replied. Hoping for the exact same thing as Emil, I went down on my knees and inched through. Hold on, I told them. There was more mist, so thick it was like the clouds had descended to the ground. I reached out tentatively, and the magic scattered and thinned as bright sunlight penetrated what remained of the fog. Squinting at the sudden light after being in the dark for so long, I slid out, my knees and hands skimming from stone to sandy, loose dirt. One hand going to the blade at my chest, and the other to the woven dagger on my thigh, I stood and took a step forward. The ground trembled faintly under my feet. I froze, looking down to see tiny rocks and clumps of sand and dirt shiver. After a heartbeat, the trembling ceased, and I lifted my gaze. The mist had completely disappeared, and I was able to take my first look at Elysium. My lips parted as my hands fell away from my daggers. The sky was a shade of blue that reminded me of the woven's eyes, pale and wintry. But the air was warm and smelled of lilacs. My gaze swept over the landscape. Gods, I whispered, lifting my chin as my gaze crawled up and up the massive statues carved out of what I assumed was shadowstone. They were as tall as the ones I'd seen in Evamon, those that had appeared to scrape the sky. And there had to be hundreds of them standing in line, continuing on to the left and right as far as I could see, maybe even thousands. There were statues of women, their heads lowered. Each hand held a stone sword that jutted forward. The stone women had wings sprouting from their backs, splayed wide, each touching the wings of the one standing on either side of them. They formed a chain of sorts, blocking whatever resided beyond. You could only pass through under the wings. They were beautiful. Poppy? Castile's voice neared the opening. You okay out there? Yeah, sorry, I cleared my throat. It's safe. Within a handful of moments, Castile and the rest made their way out, coming to stand beside me in silence. They all stared at the statues, their wonder bubbly and sugary. Are they supposed to represent the draken? I asked. I don't know. Castile's hand touched my lower back. They're stunning, though. They truly were. I guess we walk ahead and see if what they're guarding is what we're looking for. We started to cross the barren land, searching for any signs of life. There was nothing. No sound, not even a breeze or the distant call of a bird. This is kind of creepy, I murmured, looking around. The silence. Agreed. Perhaps this should be called the Land of the Dead, Delano said as he walked under the shadowed wing of a stone woman. A faint tremble stirred the ground under our feet. Castile threw out a hand. We all stopped. This happened before, I told him. It stopped. The ground erupted in several geysers all around us, sending clouds of dirt into the air and spewing small rocks in every direction. I'm assuming that didn't happen last time, Vanetta remarked. Nope. I threw up a hand as clumps of dirt pelted my face and arm, and the ground burst open between Castile and me. Another tunnel of dirt exploded directly in front of Emil, forcing him back several steps. He coughed. That was rude. The ground steadied as the dust and dirt fell back to the earth. Is everyone still with us? Delano asked, wiping his face. We were. Careful. Castile knelt near the opening between us. This is one hell of a hole. He looked up, meeting my gaze, and then Kieran's. He rose slowly. I have a feeling we may have triggered something. Triggered what? Emil asked, peering over the edge, squinting. Wait. His head tilted to the side. Holy shit. What? Jumping back, he stumbled over his feet, catching himself a second before he landed on his ass. What? Vanetta demanded, reaching for her swords. Details. It would be helpful between Castile and I, the bleached bones of a hand. Ew! Appeared, fingers digging into the loose soil. Ew! What in the world of nightmare fuel is this? Castile muttered. Those fingers were connected to an arm that was nothing more than a skeleton. The top of a skull appeared. Ew! I keep picturing it. My eyes widened in horror. Dirt poured out of the empty eye sockets. Ew! Oh, that made my skin crawl. Skeletons. Ugh! Skeletons, Vanetta shouted, unsheathing her sword. Couldn't you have said that you saw skeletons in the hole? Castile cursed as another bony hand appeared, this one clutching a sword in its grip. Ugh. Armed skeletons, Vanetta yelled. Couldn't you have said you saw armed skeletons in the hole? Sorry. Emil unhooked his swords. I was kind of taken aback by the sight of fully functional fucking skeletons with weapons. My apologies. I stared at the sword. The blade was as black as the statues, the same kind of blades I'd seen in the crypts with the deities. Shadowstone. An image of my mother flashed before me, of her pulling a slender black blade from her boot. Their blades are like the one my mother had. They had to be a real memory. That had to be a real memory. Poppy, I'm glad you know it was real. Castile withdrew his swords, but we should probably discuss that later, like when we're not facing an army of the dead. Question, Delano called out, blade in hand as the top of a skull appeared from the hole nearest him. How exactly does one kill what is presumably already dead? Like super dead, Vanetta clarified, as the one before her was now halfway out of the hole, a ragged, dull brown tunic draped over the skeleton's shoulder. Through the torn clothing, I saw a twisted mass of dirt beneath its ribs. This is disgusting. God, I can't do this. Castile moved as fast as bolted lightning, thrusting his sword into the chest of the skeleton and piercing the lump of dirt. The skeleton shattered, sword and all, breaking it apart into dust. Like that? Oh, Vanetta replied. All right, then. I turned as Kieran shoved his sword into the chest of one. There were about a dozen holes behind us, a dozen skeleton guards halfway out of the ground. Another image filled my mind, one not of my mother, but of a woman with silvery white hair, the one I'd seen in my mind while I stood in the chambers of Nyktos. She'd slammed her hands into the dirt, and the ground had cracked open, bone fingers digging their way out. Her soldiers, I whispered. What? Castile demanded. These are her, free from whatever hole it had literally crawled out of. One of the skeleton soldiers rushed toward me, lifting its sword. Slipping the dagger free from my chest harness, I snapped forward, thrusting the blade into the mess of throbbing dirt. The skeleton exploded as another took its place. Behind it, another skeleton soldier lifted its sword. Kicking out, I planted my boot into the soldier's chest, pushing it back into the other. Castile shot forward, stabbing his sword into the dirt heart of the ones closest to him. I spun, slamming my dagger into the chest of the skeleton, wincing as the blade nicked bone before hitting the heart. Cutting off the head does not work, Emil shouted, and I turned to see a headless skeleton tracking the dumbfounded Atlantean. I repeat, it does not work. Vanetta whirled. Am I in love with Emil? Am I in love with Emil? I think I am. I think I'm in love with him. Vanetta whirled, thrusting one sword through the chest of a soldier and her other blade through the headless skeleton. You, she said to Emil, are a mess. Yeah, no, I'm definitely in love with Emil. I'm definitely in love with him. And you are beautiful, he replied with a grin. The female wolven rolled her eyes as she spun, taking down another as Emil shoved his sword into the chest of one coming at him. Castile shoved a soldier back as he jabbed the sword through his ribs. Behind him, a soldier raced toward him. I shot past Castile, stabbing the creature in the chest. The ground trembled once more. New geysers of dirt erupted, streaking into the air. You've got to be kidding me, Kieran growled. I spun around, heart thudding as hundreds of eruptions appeared across the barren ground from the side of the mountains of Nyktos, all the way to the stone women. These soldiers were faster, tearing out of the holes in a matter of heartbeats. Good gods, Vanetta stumbled back into Emil. He steadied her before they turned to stand back to back. A skeleton soldier ran forward on bony feet, sword raised, its jaws unhinged, opening wide to reveal nothing but a black void and the sound of screaming wind. The force blew my braid back and tugged at my tunic. Rude, I muttered, nearly choking on the scent of stale lilacs. Black, oily smoke spilled from the skeleton's mouth, thickening and solidifying as it poured to the... Y'all know how I feel about shit coming out of people's mouths. Y'all know how I feel about this shit coming out of people's mouths. Oh my god. If I keep reading, I'm gonna gag. Anyway, solidifying as it poured to the ground, forming thick ropes that slithered forward. Oh my God, I shrieked. Not ropes, not ropes, snakes. Holy shit, Delano gasped as Castile shoved his sword through the back of the screaming skeleton. That is so not right. I regret the decision to join you all, Emil announced. I regret this decision very much. Snakes. God, I hated snakes. Bile rose in my throat as I danced out of the way of the serpents. My scream built in my throat as several of the other skeletons howled. More black smoke followed. More snakes. Not Piper the lost moderator. Twisting, I shoved my dagger into a soldier's chest. I would have to table what I was seeing and deal with my lifetime of nightmares later. Castile took out a soldier as he slammed his body down on a snake. The smoke serpent flattened into an oily stain, turning my stomach. I'd also have to vomit about that later. Poppy, his head jerked up. I know you said you didn't think you should use the ether, but I really think now would be a good time to go full deity on these fuckers. Second that, Vanetta called as she kicked a serpent away from her. It landed near her brother, who shot her a dirty look. I had to agree as I thrust my dagger into the chest of a soldier. The freaking smoke serpents outweighed whatever risks during using the ether and Elysium introduced. I sheathed my daggers, focusing on the hum in my chest. I let it come to the surface of my skin. No, I realized. I summoned it to the surface of my skin. Silvery white light crowded the sides of my vision as it sparked over my skin. The skeleton soldiers turned toward me, all of them. Their mouths opened as they screamed. Smoke poured from the voids, falling to the ground. Oh, Kieran straightened. Shit. That didn't remotely articulate what I felt as hundreds of serpents slithered over the earth around the holes. Cursing violently, Castile stomped his boot down again. The soldiers moved in unison, sprinting toward me. In my mind, I didn't picture the fine webbing. I needed something faster, more intense, something final. And I didn't even know why, but I thought of the torches inside the temples of Nyktos and their silvery flames. Fire. God, if I was wrong, I wouldn't be the only one regretting this, but I pictured the flames in my mind. Silvery white. Not the cord of silver flames. Is it silver? A cord of silver flames? Yeah, it's silver flames, right? Yeah. Silvery white and intense. My hands warmed and tingled. My entire body throbbed with heat and power. I didn't know if it was instinct or if it was because the serpents were so close, but I lifted my hands. Silver white flames spiraled down my arms and erupted from my palms, erupted from me. Someone gasped. It could have been me. The fire roared, licking the ground and catching the serpents. The creatures hissed and screeched as the flames consumed them. The inferno rolled across the land, hitting the skeletons with a wave of flames. Crackling, fiery light streaked between Castile and Kieran, washing over the soldiers there and then spread out from me, following exactly what I saw in my mind, burning only the skeletons and serpents, leaving everything else untouched. And then I pulled back the ether, picturing it receding and returning to me. The fire pulsed intensely, straining toward Castile and the others as if it wanted to consume them too. But I didn't want that. The flames turned bright white, spitting sparks high into the air and then fizzling out until only faint wisps of pale smoke remained. Everyone was staring at me. I didn't know if that would work or not, I admitted. Well, Vanetta drew the word out, her pale eyes wide. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's grateful that it did. I looked down at my hands and then up, finding Castile. I guess I'm the queen of flesh and fire. Castile nodded as he stalked toward me, his eyes a heated amber. I know you're the queen of my heart. Blinking, I lowered my hands as he stopped in front of me. Did you seriously just say that? One dimple appeared as he clasped the back of my head and lowered his head to mine. I sure as fuck did. That was so cheesy, I said. I know. Ugh. Castile kissed me, and there was nothing ridiculous about that. His tongue parted my lips, and I welcomed his taste. All right, this is a little awkward, Vanetta observed. They do this all the time, Kieran sighed. You'll get used to it. Better than them fighting, Delano remarked. Castile grinned against my lips. You're extraordinary, he murmured. Don't ever forget that. I kissed him in response, and then unfortunately pulled free. We should probably get moving. More could come. Let's hope not, Emil said, sheathing his sword. Everyone okay? Castile asked as we started walking. No snake bites? Luckily, everyone was fine, but as we neared the shadows of the stone women, I said, maybe I should go first. Delano bowed, extending an arm as Vanetta shook dust from her braids. Be my guest. My grin froze as I tentatively stepped into the shadow of a wing. The ground did tremor, but it was the holes filling back with dirt. The landscape was once again flat and whole. Okay, I breathed. That's a good sign. Castile was the first to join me, and then the others. We continued on, passing under the wing. The sandy dirt hardened under our feet. Patches of grass appeared, giving way to a lush meadow of bright orange flowers. Poppies, Delano whispered. Lips parting, I looked over at Castile. He shook his head in slight disbelief. The flowers we walked through could have just been a coincidence, but my steps slowed as we realized we were coming to the crest of a gently sloping hill, and were finally able to see what the stone women and those skeleton soldiers had been guarding. A sweeping temple sat in the valley. Pillars constructed of shadow stone lined the wide, crescent-shaped steps and the colonnade? Yeah. The structure was massive, nearly double the size of the palace in Evamon, even without the additional wings. It rose against the blue sky in soaring towers and spires, as if the fingers of the night were reaching up from the land to touch daylight. Smaller shapes were situated around the temple, possibly mounds or statues. I couldn't make out what they were from the distance, but it wasn't the only thing that had been protected. It was what rested in the hills and valleys miles beyond the temple. It was Dalos, the city of the gods. Warm beams of sunlight reflected off the diamond-bright sides of buildings sprawled across the hills. Crystalline towers rose into the sky in graceful arcs, parting the wispy white clouds sprinkled over the city and extending beyond them, glittering as if 1,000 stars had kissed them. An odd silence fell over us as we gazed upon the city. Several long moments of silence passed before Emil spoke, his voice thick. I have to believe that this is what the veil looks like. It really could be. Nothing could be more beautiful. Do you think anyone in the city is awake? Veneta asked quietly. My heart skipped a beat. Could there be? Castile shook his head. It's possible, but we won't find out. His gaze touched mine. Remember Willow's warning. I swallowed, nodding. We can't go into the city. I reminded everyone. Maybe gods are awake there, but that's why we can't. I looked at Emil. Or maybe Dalos is a part of the veil. Clearing his throat, Emil nodded. Yeah. If gods were awake in the city, I had to wonder if they were unaware of what was happening past the mountains of Nykthos, or if they simply didn't care. You think that's the temple where Nykthos may sleep? Delano asked. Kieran inhaled deeply. We might as well find out. We started down the hill, the grass reaching our knees. The air smelled of fresh lilacs and something I couldn't place. It was a woodsy scent, but a sweet one, a more than pleasant smell. I tried to figure it out, but couldn't by the time we reached the bottom of the hill. The grass became white, soil that reminded me of sand, but there was no beach that I could see, and it was brighter than sand. It sparkled in the sun and crunched under our... Are we walking on diamonds? Veneta stared at the ground, disbelief echoing from her. I think we're actually walking on diamonds. I have no words for this, Castile commented as Delano bent and picked up a piece. But diamonds are birthed from the joyous tears of the gods in love. My gaze shifted to the temple, and I thought of Nykthos and the consort that he was so protective of. No one even knew her name. You are all staring at diamonds, Kieran stated, his wariness pressing against my skin. Meanwhile, I'm just waiting for you all to realize what this giant-ass statue is. I looked at what Kieran stared at, and my stomach dropped. The mounds I'd seen from the top of the hill weren't several small statues, but one very large one of what appeared to be a slumbering dragon at the steps of the temple. Just off to the right. It looked like the sketches I'd seen in books containing fables, except its neck wasn't nearly as long, and even with the wings carved to be tucked against the body, it was so much bigger. Whoa, Veneta murmured as we neared the statue and the steps of the temple. Let's take slow steps, Castile advised. If this is Nykthos' resting place, his guards may be nearby, and not stone ones. Draken. If this thing comes to life, I'm out of here, Emil grumbled. You will never see an Atlantean run faster. A wry grin tugged at my lips as I slowly approached the statue, marveling at the sculpture. From the nostrils to the frill of spikes around the beast's head, to the claws and the horns on the tips of its wings, every intricate detail had been captured. Is that an actual for-real dragon? How long would it have taken someone to carve something this large? I reached out, running my fingers over the side of the face. The stone was rough and bumpy. Surprisingly poppy. Castile snagged my wrist. The whole proceed with caution thing also included not randomly touching things. Lifting my hand to his mouth, he pressed a kiss to my fingers. Okay? I nodded, letting him guide me away. The stone was really warm, though. Isn't that kind of... I knew it. A crack of thunder sounded, reverberating through the valley. I looked down, half expecting the ground to open. Kieran started to back up as he stared behind us. Guys... I whipped around, my lips parting as a piece of the stone shattered over the side of the beast's face and fell away, revealing a deeper shade of gray and an eye. An actual open eye of vivid blue with an aura of luminous white behind a thin, vertical pupil. Oh, shit. Emil whispered. Shit. Run. A deep rumbling sound came from within the statue, causing icy fear to drench my skin. Fissures raced through the stone. Sections, both large and small, fell away, thumping off the ground. I was frozen where I stood. No one ran. They too had locked up. Maybe it was out of disbelief or an intuitive knowledge that running wouldn't save us. This wasn't a stone dragon. It was a draken in its true form, rising from where it had been resting against the ground, its large, muscular body shaking off the dust in tiny pieces of stone. I might have stopped breathing. The deep, rumbling sound continued as the draken swung its head toward us. Its thick, spiked tail sweeping across the diamonds. 2 vibrant blue eyes locked with mine. Stay completely still, Castile ordered quietly. Please, Poppy, do not move. Like I could do anything else. A low snarl vibrated from the draken as its lips peeled back, revealing a row of large teeth sharper than any blade. The draken lowered its head toward me. My heart might have stopped. I was staring at a draken, a real, live draken, and it was magnificent and frightening and beautiful. The draken's nostrils flared as it sniffed the air, sniffed me. The snarling eased as it continued staring with eyes so full of intelligence it awed me. It tilted its head. A soft, whirring trill came from its throat, and I had no idea what that meant. But it had to be better than the snarling. A thin membrane fluttered across its eyes, and then its gaze shifted past me, past where Castile and the others stood, to the temple. A wave of awareness shivered through me, raising the tiny hairs all over my body. Pressure pushed against the nape of my neck, boring into the center of my back. I turned around without really having made a conscious decision to do so. Castile did the same. I didn't know if any of the others followed because all I could see was the man standing on the temple steps between 2 pillars. No fucking way. He was tall. Taller than even Castile. Okay. Mid-length brown. Mid-length brown hair fell to his shoulders. Glinting a coppery red in the sunlight. Oh yeah. The dusky, wheatish skin of his features was all planes and angles, pieced together with the same beautiful mastery as the stone shell that had encased the dragon. Okay! He would have been the most beautiful being I'd ever seen if it weren't for the infinite coldness of his features. Oh, yes! And his luminous eyes, the color of the brightest moon. I knew who he was, even though his face had never been painted or carved. It was Nykthos! Oh, bitch. Oh, yup. Yeah. Chapter what? What fucking chapter is this? Chapter 30, 40, and we're finally getting good. It's finally at a place where it's good. Oh. Ooh. Let's just read that again. He would have been the most beautiful being I'd ever seen if it weren't for the infinite coldness of his features. To me, that just makes him even more beautiful. That is the icing on the cake. Long hair, shoulder length. Let me just say this right now. I am fully picturing Hal from Howl's Moving Castle right now. But like different, sharper features and like obviously like brown hair. But no bangs. I think he has bangs. No, he doesn't have bangs. Does he have? No, he doesn't have bangs. Yeah. I'm like kind of just picturing Hal, but different. Yeah. Here we go. Y'all want to read chapter 41 with me? We can read chapter 41. It's only 6 pages, so, and I don't want to go home, so we'll just read chapter 41. The king of gods stood before us, dressed in a white tunic that he wore over loose black pants. Y'all know that's what Hal wears. Y'all know that is exactly what Hal wears whenever he's showing Sophie the garden. The garden! The garden scene! Oh my god. Oh my god! Okay. Yes. A fire just has been ignited in me. He was also barefoot. He was also barefoot. I can never look that. I didn't know why I was focused on that, but I didn't know why I focused on that, but I did. It was also why I was a little behind everyone else who had already lowered themselves to one knee, placing a hand over their hearts and their palms to the ground. "Peppy," Castile whispered, his head bowed. I dropped so fast I nearly face-planted. The sharp ridges of the diamonds dug into my knee, but I barely felt them as I placed my right hand over my heart and my left palm to the rocky surface. Hot breath stirred the wisps of hair at the back of my neck, sending a bolt of unease down my spine. A rough, chuffing sound followed, reminding me an awful lot of laughter. Interesting. Came a voice so laden with power and authority that it pressed upon my skull. Oh my god! You've awakened Nektas and still breathe. That can only mean one thing. My blood kneels before me. Silence echoed around me as I lifted my head. There were several feet between the god and me, but his silver-eyed stare pierced straight through me. "It is I. That I know," he answered. "I saw you in my sleep, kneeling beside the one you kneel behind me now. Behind now. Kneeling beside the one you kneel behind now. Okay. It was when we married," Castile spoke, his head still bowed. "And I gave you to my blessing," Nykthos added. "Yet you dare to enter Elysium and wake me. What a way to show your gratitude. Should I kill all of you before I learn why? Or do I even care enough to discover the reasons?" It could have been everything I'd experienced in my life that led to this moment. It could have been the bitter fear that punched through Castile, fear for me and not him. It could have been my fear for him and my friends. It was probably all of those things that drove me to my feet and loosened my tongue. "How about you don't kill any of us, considering you've been asleep for eons and we came here seeking your aid?" The king of gods came down a step. How about I kill you? How about I just kill you? Sorry. Castile moved so fast, I barely saw him do so until he was standing in front of me, using his body as a shield. She means no disrespect, but she has disrespected me. My stomach twisted as Kieran's fingers dug into the diamonds. I knew that not even the Wolven would protect me in this situation. I may represent the deities to them, but Nykthos was the god that gave them mortal form. "I'm sorry," I said, attempting to step to the side, but Castile moved too, keeping me behind him. "Then should I kill him?" Nykthos suggested. The terror turned my blood to ice. "I have a feeling that would serve as a better lesson than your death. I'm sure you mind your manners then." Real fear for Castile seized me, reaching deep inside and sinking its vicious claws into my chest. Nykthos could do it without a thought, and that knowledge severed whatever self-control I have. Heat rolled through me, turning the ice to slush in my blood. Anger flooded every part of my body, and it felt as potent as the power in the god's voice. "No." Castile stiffened. "No." The king of gods repeated. Fury and resolve mingled with the hum in my chest. Ether throbbed throughout my body, and this time, when I sidestepped Castile, he wasn't fast enough to block me. I stood in front of him, hands at my sides and feet spread wide. Silvery white light cracked over my skin, and I knew I couldn't stop Nykthos. Even if he wanted us dead, we would die. Or if he wanted us dead, we would die. But that didn't mean I would stand by. I would die 1,000 deaths before I allowed that. Without warning, an image flashed in my mind. The silver-haired woman standing before another as the stars fell from the sky. Her hands balled into fists. Her words came from my lips. "I will not let you harm him or any of my friends." Nykthos' head tilted to the side as his eyes widened slightly. "Interesting," he murmured, his gaze flicking over me. "Now I understand why sleep has been so hard lately, why we dream so intensely." A brief pause. "And you do not need anyone to stand before you in defense." His statement shook me enough that the ether fizzled out. "Though," he continued, his gaze sliding to where Castile stood, "it's admirable of you to do so. I see that my approval of the union was not a mistake. The breath that left me was of was one of ragged relief, but the Niktos turned away. He started walking up the stairs. Where was he going? I stepped forward and the god stopped, looking over his shoulder. He wanted to speak. Come, but only you. No one else can enter or they will die. Oh! Heart thundering, I twisted toward Castile. His features were sharp as crystal bright eyes locked with mine. A desperate sense of helplessness echoed throughout him. He didn't want me to enter that temple, but he knew I had to. Do not get yourself killed, he ordered. I will be very angry if you do. I won't, I promised. At least I hoped I didn't. The draken named Nektas made that gravelly chuckling sound again. I love you. Prove it to me later. Drawing in a shallow breath, I nodded and then turned, following the king of gods. He stood before the open doors, extending a hand toward the shadowy interior. Hoping I walked back out, I entered. Make sure they behave, Nektas, the god requested. I turned to see Castile and the others rise while the dragon thumped its tail off the diamond-strewn ground. The doors closed without a sound, and I was suddenly alone with the king of gods. Whatever idiotic bravery had invaded me earlier quickly vanished as Nikto said nothing and simply stared at me. I did what I hadn't allowed since I first saw him. I opened my senses, letting them stretch. I wouldn't do that. I sucked in a startled breath. It would be very unwise. Nikto dipped his chin. His eyes burned a bright silver and very impolite. This is it. This is it. This is everything I've been waiting for. Yes. Oh my god. Air tightened in my throat as I wrangled my senses back in. My hands are sweating. My hands are sweating, y'all. My gaze quickly flicked around, looking for another exit without turning my back to him. There was nothing but black walls and sconces. But who was I kidding? I knew running would do no good. Niktos moved then, striding forward. I tensed and a smile appeared. Minding your manners now? Oh my god! Yes, I whispered. He chuckled. And the sound, it was like the wind on a warm day. Bravery is a fleeting beast, isn't it? Always there to get you into trouble, but quick to disappear once you're where you want to be. No truer words had ever been spoken. The scent of sandalwood brushed over me as he passed. He smells like sandalwood. This man smells like sandalwood. He smells like sandalwood. I turned, finally seeing. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna get it together, I promise. I turned, finally seeing the rest of the chamber. I'm sweating. Two large doors were closed. Winding shadowstone staircases rose on either side. Sit, he offered, gesturing to the two white chairs in the center of the chamber. A round table sat between them, a table made of bone. On top sat a bottle and two glasses. My brow furrowed as I towed my gaze from the table and the chairs to the god. You were expecting us? No. He sat in the chair and reached for the bottle. I was expecting you. I stood there. Then we didn't wake you. Oh, you woke me quite some time ago, he replied, pouring what looked like red wine into a delicate stemmed glass. I wasn't sure exactly why, but I'm beginning to understand. My thoughts spun. Then why did you threaten to kill us? Let's make one thing clear, Queen of Flesh and Fire, he said, and a shudder worked its way through me as he looked over at me. I do not threaten death. I make death happen. I was simply curious to see what you and your chosen were made of. He smiled slightly, pouring wine into the other glass. Sit. Oh my god! I forced my legs to move. My boots made no sound as I walked across the floor. I sat stiffly as I told myself not to ask any of the 1,000 questions brewing. It was best that I get to the point and then get the hell out of there as fast as possible. That was not what happened. Are any other gods awake? Your consort? Is this bitch dumb? Does this bitch have Is this bitch dumb? I blurted out. An eyebrow rose as he placed the bottle back on the table. You know the answer to that. You saw one yourself. My breath caught. Ios had appeared while we'd been in the Skotos Mountains, stopping me from what would have been a very messy death. Some have stirred enough to be aware of the realm outside of others. Others have remained in a semi-lucid state. A few are still in the deepest sleep, he answered. My consort sleeps now, but she does so fitfully. How long have you been awake? The others? Hard to say. He slid the glass toward me. It's been on and off for centuries, but more frequent in the last 2 decades. I didn't touch the glass. And you know what happened in Atlantia? Solace? I'm the king of gods. He leaned back, crossing a leg over the other. The repose and everything about him was relaxed. It rattled me because there was a thread of intensity under the looseness. What do you think? Or what do you think? My lips parted in disbelief. Then you know about the Ascended, what they've done to people, to mortals, your children. How have you not intervened? Why haven't any of the gods stepped in to do something to stop them? The moment my demands left my mouth, my entire body seized with dread. He was most certainly going to kill me now, shared blood or not. But he smiled. You were so much like her, he laughed. She'll be thrilled to learn this. My shoulders tightened. Who? Do you know that most of the gods who sleep now were not the first gods? Nyktos asked, instead of answering, sipping his wine. There were others known as the primal. They were the ones who created the air we breathe, the land we reap, the seas that surround us, the realms, and all in between. No, I didn't know that, I admitted, thinking of what Jansen had said about Nyktos once being the god of death and the primal god of common men and endings. Most do not. They were once great rulers and protectors of man. They did not last. Much like with the children of those who sleep now, they became tainted and twisted, corrupt and uncontrollable. He told me, his gaze moving to his drink. If you knew what they had become, the kind of wrath and evil they spread upon the lands of man, you would not be haunted till the days. You would be haunted to the end of your days. Sorry. We had to stop them. We did. That one eyebrow, his right one, rose again, but not before we ended the mortal lands as those who survived remembered, sending them into the dark ages that it took centuries and centuries for them to claw out of. I bet you didn't know that either. I shook my head. You wouldn't. The history of all that was before has been destroyed. Only a handful of structures survived, he stated, swishing the red liquid in his glass. Unthinkable sacrifices were made to ensure that the sickness could never infect the world again. But obviously, immortals were rightfully wary of the gods. We entered into a blood treaty with them, one that ensured that the only gods born within the mortal realm could retain their powers there. Quicksilver eyes lifted to mine once more. None of the gods can enter the mortal realm without weakening greatly, and resorting to what is forbidden to ensure their strength. That is why we have not intervened. That is why my consort sleeps fitfully, Poppy. Oh, I jerked at the sound of my nickname. All of that sounded like a reasonable explanation for why they hadn't become involved, but something stood out to me. How is a god born in the mortal realm? Good question. He smiled behind his wine glass. This should not be. I frowned. His smile kicked up a notch, and then it occurred to me. What he had said about only a few primal gods being among those who slept now. If what Jansen had claimed was true, and Nyktos was already a god before he became this, are you a primal? I am. He stared at me. And that means you have primal blood in you. That is what fuels that bravery of yours. That is why you are so powerful. I took a drink then, swallowing a mouthful of the sweet wine. Does that mean my mother could have been mortal? Your mother could have been from any blood, and you would be who you are today regardless. Unexpected, but welcomed nonetheless, he said. And before I had a chance to even process what that could mean, what that could signify, he continued. But that's not what you came to talk to me about, is it? And I bet you have a lot of questions. One side of his lips tipped up as a somewhat fond look crept into his otherwise cold features. Is your brother who you want him to be? Is the mother who you remember yours? His eyes drilled into mine as goosebumps spread across my skin. Are your dreams a reality or your imagination? Who truly killed the ones you called mother and father? But you don't have long to ask those questions. You have time for only one. These lands are not meant for your friends, nor your lover. If they stay much longer, they will not be able to leave. I stiffened. None of us has entered Dalos. It doesn't matter. You came to ask for my aid. Is there nothing I can do? There is nothing I can do for you. I don't need your aid, I clarified, placing my glass on the table. Gods knew how many questions I wanted to ask about Ian, about my parents and the memories, but this trip wasn't about me. It was about those waiting outside and all those I had yet to meet. I need the aid of your guards. Nyktos' brows rose. You know who my guards are. Now I do, I mumbled under my breath. His head tilted, and I cleared my throat. You're aware of what the Ascended are doing, right? They're using Atlanteans to make more of them, and they're feeding upon innocent mortals. We need to stop them. I've learned that the Ascended have created something that I was told only your guards can help us stop. Something called a revenant. The change that swept over the god was instant and final. The facade of ease vanished. Streaks of white bled across his irises, luminous and crackling. Everything about him hardened, and every instinct in me went on high alert. What? I ventured. Do you know what the revenants are? A muscle ticked in his jaw. An abomination of life and of death. He stood abruptly, eyes settling on a pearly shade of steel. What you face is greater evil than that should not be, and I'm very sorry that you will see that. I'm very sorry that you will see what is to come. Well, that didn't bode well at all. You need to leave, Queen. The guards behind me swung open. I stood. But your guards, you were born of flesh, with the fire of the gods in your blood. You are a bringer of life and a bringer of death, Nykthos interrupted. You are the queen of flesh and fire. Do more than one crown, one kingdom. What you seek, you already have. You always had the power in you. What the fuck? What the fuck? What? What? Wait? What? Spoiler. Oh, so don't go up there. It sure is. Right now it is. Hold on. I thought... B, don't scroll up. Okay, I saw all of Sarah's comments, so I didn't see anything. But I'm confused! What? What does this mean? What's going on? What is this? So, a revenant... Now I'm scared. Because if a revenant can make the king of gods act like that, what the fuck is it? What the fuck is a revenant? Now I have so many questions. First of all, this consort of his, it's just like a side thing, right? It's just like it's not serious, right? There's not like a serious commitment between them, right? Woo! Not be with that Bobby energy. I have so many questions. So many questions. Oh. Hold on. I have to put more deodorant on, y'all. I'm sweating. Don't we all? Okay, so Poppy is like hold on. Do y'all count how many times you put deodorant on? Like, do y'all count how many swipes of deodorant y'all put on? Because I have to. Anyway, and they have to be like the same amount on both sides, or else I freak out. Well, 42 through 43 are our lone chapters, so you can keep reading today. Oh, period. Perfect. Get ready for a shadow in the ember. Okay, if a shadow in the ember is about Nykthos and his little consort, I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. I'm gonna lose my marbles. Ooh, I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm so happy I did the live today, because those two chapters, good. They were good. Oh my god. But no, because now they're gonna leave. They're gonna leave Elysium, and I'm not gonna see Nykthos for a long time, and I want more from him. This was amazing. It was good. It was good. See, I told y'all, these are just as much of an escape and a distraction for me as they are for y'all. This is amazing. Aw. You get a whole book of him next. I was so excited. I'm so excited. We only have 3 or 4 lives left until I start reading. Do y'all want me to read A Shadow in the... What is it called? A Shadow in the Embers? A shadow in the embers? I think that's what it's called. A sight. A shadow in the embers. Yeah. Do y'all want me to read that one live? Yeah, I know. I was gonna read it next, but I just wanted to make sure that y'all wanted me to read it live with y'all, or just read it by myself. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Definitely live. Gotcha. I'm scared to ask this question because I'm scared of the way I will react. Is there spice? Is there spice in the next one? Is there spice in it? I don't even know I'm book reading. I just really enjoy your voice. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh boy. Is there spice in it? Is there spice? Yes. Thank God. Yes. 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 Okay, how many chapters do I have? Y'all, you know how I said I was gonna simp over Ian? I thought Ian was gonna be like the person I was gonna simp over. I'm about to throw up. I really thought Ian was the one I was gonna be simping over. I don't know why I thought we were gonna see more of him. And now I'm just here for Nikto's content now. So I'm excited. See, these 2 chapters and like the setup that I'm getting for the next book made the entire 75% of the book where I was like, oh my fucking God, dragging myself through it, made it all worth it. So Daddy Niktos tops them all. Yep. I want to Google fan art of him so bad. I want fan art of him so bad, but I don't want to get any spoilers, so I will not. All right. Well, that's it for today, y'all. I think I had some really good reactions to this one, so I'm gonna see if I can download today's live and make like a little reactions clip of it, because today was fun. Today was fun. So yeah, thank you guys for being understanding and for being just so y'all are amazing. I love y'all so much. Thank you for just being so sweet and to me. Anyway, I love you guys so much. No live tomorrow. I will be out of town tomorrow, so I will see y'all on Wednesday. Bye. Love y'all. Bye.